about national uplift, times countries have revived themselves, times offer us some hope.
Well, David, I enjoyed your comments. Of course, I'm obliged to say that I enjoyed my wife's comments even more. And my fellow Scotsman, Douglas Murray, was good too. And he's always brilliant. As I listened to these three outstanding speeches, which touched on morality, on God, and how culture changes, I kept reflecting on the role that war has played in the past, in causing national resurgences and national collapses. And your thoughts, your remarks, put me in mind of Tolstoy. Tolstoy's War and Peace is the story of ordinary people trying to live their private lives. They have their private lives turned upside down by war. And that has been the experience of friends of mine in Israel. And it has been the experience of friends of mine in Ukraine. But for most people in this auditorium, in this country, and in the United States, that's a very distant, remote experience. I have to think back to my grandfathers to understand what it's like for war to strike at the very heart of Britain. And you're the same. So a lot of what we talk about in these contexts is, from a historian's point of view, detached from the reality that it's very often the shock of war that brings about the biggest transformations, revivals or collapses of national culture. So that's the thing that sometimes gets left out of these conversations in the United States. You spoke semi-ironically, disparagingly about American elites. But American elites helped win World War II. It was American elites who built the capabilities that defeated the dark forces of National Socialism. And it was British elites who also contributed to that great victory in 1945. So let's remember, before we slag off the elites, that they played a key part in preserving Western civilization. I'll say one more thing. When I'm trying to educate my children, who are even further away than I am from that experience of conflict, of war and peace, I try to get them to read the literature that will inform them of that searing experience. And if you can't get them to read the literature, then at least get them to watch Rogue Heroes, SAS. One of the best television series I've seen in ages. And the spirit of David Sterling I find terribly uplifting. That spirit that created the Special Forces, the spirit that said, we're simply going to break the rules and get in behind the enemy lines and completely butter up the way they fight this war. It's terribly inspiring to be reminded that we British, we Scots, came up with the completely mad idea of the SAS. That's the spirit, the real spirit of Western civilization that will never, I think, die as long as we remember that our civilization was built in the crucible of war.
What are the spiritual issues that you see to tap into?
I think we're living in a time of real spiritual thirst in the West. Studies suggest that Generation Z are much more likely to be spiritual, open to the idea of God than their parents. And I think that the Judeo-Christian worldview has two really powerful and wonderful things to offer this generation that have sustained our civilization. First, we talked about a lot at the conference, the idea of being created in the image of God. God within the Bible is not an idea, God is an actuality, a person. And so to be created in the image of God is to have extraordinary dignity and value. And that, to a generation that have been raised raised being told your identity is, dependent on yourself. You have to generate it yourself, and your identity is defined by intersectional injustice, and then you're propelled by grievance into this world. What a contrast to view yourself and other human beings as sacred image bearers of a living God who we can have connection with. And I think the second most helpful idea is the idea of redemption. Possibility of grace and a second chance. Possibility of forgiveness. My grandparents came to this country in 1948, escaping Soviet occupation. They landed with my father and my aunt at RAF Northolt in the United States standing up. They had experienced the horrors of the Nazis and then of the Soviets. As a generation, they knew the reality of evil, the darkness in the human heart potentially. The Bible talks about the fall as a real category. So we've been created in the image of God, but every single person also is wrestling with sin and darkness. And so what the Judeo-Christian framework gives us is this possibility of redemption, a new start, a fresh start. And that isn't just about an individual connection with our Creator, although it is about that, and what a wonderful way to live, with attachment to a loving God as the core of our being. But it also propels people's lives for good. The parable that Jesus is most famous for, the Good Samaritan, is cited all the time as a kind of example of why we should do good and love our neighbour. But the earliest thinkers in the church, the patristic writers, realised that the central character of the Good Samaritan was Jesus himself. And what he was essentially saying is to be human is to feel like being beaten up and left at the side of the road to die. And we all need rescue, we need forgiveness, we need deliverance, we need help from outside, we need redemption. And once we've experienced that, we can rebuild our world. We can love neighbour. We can do prison reform. We can care for the poor. We can create systems that reflect a loving God and the value of every human being created in his image. And all of us have the possibility of a second chance. Businesses, when we fail, we can get up and start again. We can create wealth through this power of redemption and forgiveness.
Disagree about Donald Trump, we disagree about J.D. Vance, and probably disagree about Victor Orban. But the friendship we have is one of the ones I value because of that disagreement. Your books, going back to the Dante book, Benedict Option, the Current Book on Enchantment, they're part cultural critique, but really the things I found personally most valuable is spiritual uplift and the spiritual path. So if I could ask you to talk about that part of your work.
Yeah, my work in recent years has been about trying to save civilization, broadly considered, but the meaning crisis is at the heart of our civilizational struggle, and the meaning crisis is ultimately a religious crisis. And I don't believe that we can solve this problem by simply returning to some past that is irrecoverable. And we can't solve it either by arranging our thoughts in the correct way. Marshall McLuhan said that there are two ways of perceiving things. Well, you have percept, which is truth that you perceive, and concept, which is what happens in the left brain. When religion becomes a concept, it begins to die. So I think the real challenge for us today in this dying civilization is to reconnect to our ancestral faith, Christianity or Judaism, and to do so in a visceral way, a direct way. One of the real prophets of our time is a psychiatrist named Ian McGilchrist. I've seen him around here today. Dr. McGilchrist has a theory of culture based on brain hemispheres. He said that the left hemisphere is the analytic side, the right hemisphere is, of course, the perceptive side. The problem with the West, he says, is that at the beginning of the modern age, we lean very heavily into the left hemisphere because it gave us power. Someone yesterday quoted Yuval Noah Harari saying we exchanged meaning for power at the beginning of the modern period. And that has made us all rich and technologically advanced in all of the things. But Dr. McGilbert says it has left us utterly bereft, spiritually, creatively, and so forth. We're not going to see recovery until and unless we achieve balance. So what I write about in Living in Wonder, I'm going to go over reenchantment. By reenchantment, I don't mean sprinkling little Disney fairy dust somewhere and creating a Disney world. I mean rather having a visceral, establishing a visceral connection to transcendent values and ultimately to the living God. There are ways we can do that. We have done that in this civilization. And so, and there are practical things we can do too. I think of what Benedict XVI said, that the best arguments for Christianity in this time are not the propositional arguments. That's made for an age of reason, but rather the art the church produces and the saints. By which he means you see these principles embodied materially in art, in music, things like that, and also in goodness, radical goodness, holiness of the saints. These things speak to the heart, and the heart can't deny them. And what they do, once you accept it, get this into your heart, it opens the mind up for the propositions. I think that we are not going to recover until and unless we become reenchanted and seek a form of Christianity, and indeed of Judaism, that is more mystical, that valorizes this direct perception of the Holy Spirit, of holiness, and of transcendence. And I also think that this is where the Benedict option idea comes in. It is not, please God, about heading for the hills. There are no hills to head to. It is about forming small communities. It can be schools, it can be church communities, it can be any number of things, where people who share common faith practice spiritual disciplines together, so that when they go out into the world, as we all must unless we're called to the monastery, we can faithfully represent Jesus Christ and bring and gospel to the world. So I think David to conclude that we are desperate for meaning, and that meaning is there. Our ancestors of the pre-modern period knew it, and my general idea is that if we can return to a pre-modern form of Christianity, what the theologian, I think the theologian Hans Borsma calls a great tradition, then we have a chance of doing that. It's not going to happen overnight. This is not a quick fix, but it's certainly not something that can happen only by politics. Our old friend Victor Orban once said that I can't give you meaning as a politician. I can give you things like meaning. I can give subsidies. I can create laws that allow these other institutions to flourish. But if civil society doesn't step up, each one of us do not step up within our little platoons or in our families and so forth, then anything politics and economics might accomplish for us are in vain.
I should say I already wrote this new book, which is a 2-volume, great big tomes from Amazon, and somebody stole volume 1 off my driveway, which shows the hunger for epistemology. John was just talking about the role politics can and cannot play. You, unlike the rest of us, have served in political office. How do you think about politics in a time like this?
David, thank you. A couple of days before I came over, my mind on higher things like art in London, and I really got to go there in the dead of winter, jet lag and what have you. I absent-mindedly filled my farm ute, we call it in Australia, truck, we call it in America, with the wrong fuel. You'll get the point straight away. I put diesel in the petrol. And as the vehicles I drove up down the road started to absorb the wrong fuel, it started initially to surround, but there was actually happened grey smoke going everywhere. It became less and less powerful and it died on the side of the road. And you think, well, this is very inconvenient, and I wonder what this is going to cost me, because I've probably done a lot of damage, etc., etc. How bad is it all going to be? The amazing thing was that we drained the dead fuel out, or the wrong fuel out, and refueled with the right fuel, like British engineering in that vehicle. So amazingly, it started and ran perfectly. Now, the point is, out of that we should not be overly despairing. The reality is that our forefathers have visited upon us the institutions of freedom, But just like that motor car, the engine was still there, the wheels were still there, the gearbox was still there, put the right fuel in it, it all started to work again. And as Neil has just said, of course we need a lease. You've got to have a lease. Someone's got to lead. Somebody's got to be highly enough educated to lead in the field of medicine. Somebody's got to be gifted enough to actually lead and inspire in the area of theology. Somebody's got to be good enough to inspire a nation. Think of Britain in the 30s, the Oxford Pledge, under no circumstances will this house fight for king and country, passed overwhelmingly. A few short years ago, under strong leadership, the young people of this nation were fighting for the very survival of everything that matters. It's a remarkable story written about, well, philosophy written about it probably. Those institutions can be resurrected with the right people. Point 2. Have you noticed how many remarkable young people have come here to ARC in London? I've had the opportunity and the privilege, and a horribly difficult task, of helping decide who gets to sit around a cabinet table. I've met people here who have all the ability necessary to make up competent cabinets. Well, how about you give some thought to stepping up, to making the sacrifices involved, because we need you. And I'm always deeply torn when a young person of real ability, and I say go away, it's not for you, real ability, they say I'm interested in politics, I want to serve, because it's not fun. But on the other hand, it's the bad fun. If you're involved in culture, well, you've got to be prepared to be involved. You have to step up. You've got to look into the opportunities. Third point. You've seen many wonderful examples of people who have gone out on a limb, who have displayed great courage, who have done deep thinking, and they've come here today. I mean, I don't want to be sort of create a hierarchy here, but I thought what Allianz has done in recent time has been remarkable. What an example. What an example of courage. And tomorrow it'll be a great privilege for me to see on the stage, and you will meet somebody well known to Australians, perhaps not so well known outside yet, a very dear friend of mine, Peter Costello. We served in the Parliament of Australia together for roughly 2 decades. That man had a highly successful legal career and every reason to pursue his own self-interest, but he gave it up for the grind of politics. He presided over 11 budgets in Australia where we managed completely to pay down all Commonwealth debt and leave a surplus in the bank. That's reform. That's ending intergenerational effect. That's building a platform for tomorrow's kids and for our grandchildren. You'll hear from him tomorrow. There are examples everywhere, but take note of him. He didn't have to do it, but he did. And I'll just make 2 points about, because I served with him on what we call the Ways Again for years. Woe betide anybody who walked through the room, any minister saying, I've got this great new program, and he'd say, this looks like rent-seeking to me. The minister would say, no, it's not rent-seeking. And Peter would say, yes, it is. For these reasons, you're not getting it. But equally, justice and fairness. Woe betide a minister who came in with a proposal for saving money that will hit somebody genuinely in need. That distinction's terribly important. So, let's not give up. The machine is still operable. The institutions of freedom that our grandparents gave us, with the right freedom, with the right elites, with the right people motivated by the right, if you like, spirituality, for a better word, we can recapture freedom. It's not too late. So you young people, be encouraged, but be challenged as well. Yeah.